Welcome to ODE-CMP's annual training for the Summer Food Service Program, or SFSP 2026. I am your host, Kathy Brock, Child Nutrition Specialist and Summer Food Service Program Outreach Coordinator. This training is required for food program coordinators renewing their SFSP operations for 2026. In this training, we will cover pre-operational tasks, operational requirements, and administrative reviews. Throughout the training, we will not only cover general information on these topics, but also common findings and tips from reviewers. By the end of this training, you will understand pre-operational requirements for the SFSP, have a deeper understanding of operational requirements, and have increased confidence during administrative reviews. Without further ado, let's begin. We are starting off with pre-operational requirements. An overview of pre-operational requirements for renewal include complete annual training. Civil rights training is required if it has not already been completed as part of the Child and Adult Care Food Program, or CACFP. And if you're operating rural non-congregate meals, you will also need to complete the non-congregate trainings assigned in the renewal letter. Complete SFSP renewal in CMP Web. For non-school food authorities only, complete a budget. For rural non-congregate meals only, complete a meal distribution plan. And if applicable, ensure vended meal agreements or VMAs or food service management companies or FSMC contracts are up to date. An overview of these requirements for post-renewals but before operations start include notifying the health department, hire and train SFSP staff, develop the menu, and conduct pre-operational visits for new sites. There are 3 types of forms for school food authorities and 4 types of forms for non-school food authorities in CMP Web that need to be reviewed, updated as needed, and submitted for pending approval to ODE-CMP. Let's review what forms are required. First is the sponsor information sheet. Update this as needed and make sure all the contacts listed are current and correct. Are you a new food program coordinator or do you have a new authorized representative? Update the sponsor info sheet for fiscal year 2025 and submit for pending approval prior to starting fiscal year 2026's renewal. You will also be assigned additional trainings as someone new to oversight responsibilities. Next is for non-school food authorities only, and that is a budget. This form in CMP Web is based on the information found in the Excel budget that will also be completed and approved by ODE-CMP. This Excel budget is in the list of forms on the Packet tab of CMP Web. Next is the management plan, how your organization plans to implement and manage SFSP. Sponsors that operate both SFSP and CACFP may elect to use their CACFP management plan for SFSP. Reviewing this form is a great way to refresh yourself on how your organization plans to operate the program compared to the requirements. Finally, site information sheets. Each site will have their own information sheet and need to be revised to reflect fiscal year 2026. The information entered during renewals is to the best of your knowledge. ODE-CMP understands that many sites, especially those in schools, may not be set in stone until after the renewal due date. It is important that if you first enter preliminary information, that you revise and resubmit the form once you have confirmation about the site and its operations. Sponsors can add and remove sites after approval in CMP Web for 2026. This includes during SFSP operations. An important reminder on this, especially in the summer months. If a site needs to open after the renewal is approved, the site must be approved in CMP Web before meal service operations can begin. It is best practice to have information updated in CMP Web regarding the starting or stopping of sites at least 2 weeks in advance to ensure timely approval, and information will be updated on the Summer Meal Site Finder. Please keep in contact with your child nutrition specialist while adding the sites to ensure timely approval. Per 7 CFR 226.16a, sponsors are required to send a letter advising the appropriate health department of their intention to provide food service during a specific period at specific sites. This letter must include site names, site addresses, operational time frame, meals served, and meal times. There is not an exemption for this for sites that operate under NSLP. This requirement ties back to line 48 of the site information sheet, in which sponsors are required to mark yes that they have notified the appropriate health department of their intent to provide a food service at the site. Here we have our first common finding during administrative reviews. This finding is the failure to notify the health department. Sponsors are required to maintain documentation that the health department was notified of SFSP sites. Best practice is to do this in writing, and this can be hard or electronic copy, aka an email. If they are contacted by phone call, there are two ways this can be documented. First is to follow up via email with the same information. The second is to document the entire call. That means who was called, when, and what information was given to them. This is so you have it in writing and can show documentation. The documentation must include all items mentioned on the previous slide for all sites. This also means that the health department must be notified if sites are added during the summer. On to staffing the SFSP. To properly implement the SFSP, there must be enough staff to have adequate oversight on the program, prepare the amount of meals that are anticipated to be served, and adequately supervise the entire meal service. The meal service time is a time block that is listed in CMP Web. Potential SFSP staff include nutrition services staff from the school year, teaching aides or teachers, administrative staff, participants in the Parent and Teachers Association or organization, student workers, and volunteers from community organizations. There are some considerations when it comes to the amount of staff that may be needed. For instance, congregate meals may require more staff to be on site during meal service than a non-congregate meal site. There are also a couple of ways that can provide flexibility for staff. As many staff typically work during the school year, summers can be the one time they can get off of work. One way to provide flexibility is to stagger time periods that staff are working for. This could be hiring some staff to work for the first half of summer operations and other staff to work the later half. Alternatively, staff may only work certain days of the week. For example, some staff may be assigned the Monday through Wednesday shift, and another group of staff will be hired to work Thursday and Fridays. Operations at eligible rural non-congregate sites could be moving to non-congregate multi-day meals. For instance, if serving 3 days of meals on Monday and 2 days of meals on Thursday, staff may only be needed to be hired to work on Mondays and Thursdays to prepare, pack, and serve or deliver the meals. Once staff has been hired, it is time for them to be trained. All staff are required to be trained annually prior to taking on SFSP duties, regardless if they were part of the summer staff last year or not. Staff and volunteers only need to be trained on their SFSP duties specific to their role. For instance, they may only need to be trained on point of service meal count, the type of meal service they will be carrying out, the meal pattern requirements so they identify reimbursable meals, and offer versus serve for the meal pattern being used, if applicable. All staff is required to be trained on civil rights. This includes what the protected classes are, how to handle civil rights complaints, and where to find forms and the log. Sponsors may choose to use ODE trainings and tailor them to fit their specific meal service or develop their own. Training must be documented because if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. Documentation must include the sponsor name, who led the training, the attendees' full names and signatures, the date training was completed, and the agenda or what they were trained on. There is a form that has fields for all this information on the SFSP public webpage in the Planning and Training subheading. Sponsors may train vendor staff on what they may need to know as well, such as meal pattern. We have another common finding alert: failure to train staff prior to operations. The food program coordinator staff annual training does not equate to annual staff training. Site staff must be trained on duties they will have and on civil rights. Sponsors must maintain documentation that supports who was trained on what and when. There is a SFSP training agenda with sign-in sheet available on the SFSP public website. Our first set of tips is related to staff training. First, ODE CMP does have training recording for site monitors and site supervisors. Sponsors do need to provide their monitors and supervisors with organization-specific information, but this is a good place to start. If you decide to have your staff take virtual training, have trainees submit certification statements that include their name, the trainings they took, and dates training was completed. Here is an example statement. I, Bobby Lindell, certify that I completed the site monitoring training 5/13/26, meal pattern and service training 5/13/26, and civil rights and racial and ethnic data collection trainings 5/14/26. Please note, you will need to collect and maintain these certification statements, so you may want to have a designated folder in your email or on your desktop of these emails. As a friendly reminder, staff and volunteers that start during SFSP operations must receive training as well. Pre-operations is also the time to be developing your summer menu. Things to keep in mind when developing your menu are: 1. It must meet meal pattern requirements. All sponsors can use the Summer Food Service Program meal pattern. School food authorities may elect to use the NSLP meal pattern. Whichever one is selected, it must be adhered to for the summer. 2. Ensure that the foods are appropriate for the site type and location. Food safety is always important, but it is especially important in the SFSP when food is prepared and transferred to another location for service. Meals transported from the prep site to service sites must be able to maintain temperature control and be served in a time frame to minimize the chance of foodborne illnesses. Lastly, make sure you have proper documentation for all combination food items served that will credit towards a reimbursable meal. This is most important for the combination foods that will credit for the grain and meat alternate. Sponsors need to be able to show how items such as peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, deli turkey sandwiches, and chicken nuggets meet crediting requirements for a reimbursable meal. The following items are what can be used to show reviewers that the item meets meal pattern requirements. For items prepared in-house, a recipe analysis workbook from the USDA Food Buying Guide, while commercially prepared foods, a child nutrition label, or manufacturer's product formulation statement is needed. As a reminder, this is the SFSP meal pattern. Breakfast is required to include 1 cup of fluid milk, a half cup of fruit vegetable or 100% juice, and 1 slice of bread or 1 ounce of ready-to-eat cereal or a half a cup of cooked cereal. Lunch must include 1 cup of fluid milk, 2 ounces of meat alternate or 1 egg or a half cup of cooked beans or peas or 1 cup of yogurt, 3/4 cup of 2 separate servings of fruit and or vegetable, and 1 slice of bread or equivalent grain. Here is the meal pattern PDF. You may have seen this a time or two. The main differences the SFSP meal pattern has compared to the NSLP is that there is no vegetable subgroups. In fact, the fruit and vegetable groups are combined. You just need to offer 2 different items in this category. This means you could potentially offer 2 different fruits. There is no whole grain requirement. There is no limit on cow milk types. There is also no nutrient specifications that need to be met. This is all to say that you can't still do these things, just that it's not required that they be met. Here are some tips for your menu. Utilizing a cycle menu can be helpful for a multitude of reasons. First, it requires less thought than trying to come up with a new meal for each day. You can also use up items on hand if there's extras after the original meal service. Additionally, it can help participants anticipate what will be served next. Summer is also the perfect time to incorporate seasonal and local foods. Farm to CMP does allocate funds to summer sponsors for the purchase of local foods. It is best practice to have someone separate from the menu writer who is also trained on the meal pattern to double-check the menu to ensure it meets requirements. The pre-operational visit form must be completed for any new sites being added to the SFSP for the current fiscal year. A new site is any site that has not operated the SFSP in the previous year under your program's agreement. The pre-operational visit form must be completed prior to the site starting SFSP operations. This form is a tool that can be used to assess how well the site is equipped to serve summer meals. The entire form must be completed. If a question is not applicable, please write NA by that question. This form is available on the SFSP public website under the Monitoring subheading. Here are a few tips for the pre-operational period. First, use a checklist as a device to alert or remind the food program coordinator of what needs to be done. The SFSP Administrative Guide from USDA has a prototype sponsor planning checklist that may be used. Another helpful device is a recurring calendar alert to begin pre-operational tasks. It's best practice to include staff with other oversight and administrative responsibilities who can take on some of these tasks. Write, implement, and maintain a procedure for pre-SFSP operations. Since a procedure is only good if it can be followed, ensure that it is available to other oversight staff. This could be storing it in an SFSP binder or saving it to a shared drive. Finally, make sure you have the most current forms on hand. Check the ODE CMP public website to see if there are updates to any forms. ODE CMP does send memos when there are new forms available as well. We've made it to the main event, operational requirements. Here are a few areas to be paying attention to during operations. Meet meal pattern requirements, meet meal service requirements, meet civil rights requirements, and conduct site monitoring. Now this list may look short, but don't let that deceive you. Let's dive in. During the pre-operational stage, you developed a menu. Now it is about making sure that the meals being served meet the meal pattern requirements, and staff can demonstrate that this was done. How do we do this? For starters, the documentation must reflect the actual foods being served, meaning that staff are using either a working menu or production record to document any changes to the menu. For instance, if an item is substituted or added to the menu. Having oversight means that you're ensuring that the staff are following recipes and CN labels for combination food items. For example, if mini corn dogs are on the menu, are the staff serving enough of them to meet the grain and meat alternate requirement? In this case, monitors will want to compare what they observe being served to what the CN label says should be served. School food authorities may elect to utilize offer versus serve. If doing OVS, it must be the OVS for the meal pattern being used as indicated in CMP Web. In other words, the National School Lunch Program or NSLP OVS cannot be used for the SFSP meal pattern. Let's review what OVS looks like in the SFSP. For SFSP Breakfast OVS, the sponsor must offer 4 food items of the 3 components required. For example, they can offer cold cereal, a muffin, milk, and applesauce. That would be 2 grain items, 1 milk, and 1 fruit. In another example, a muffin, milk, applesauce, and orange juice can be offered. This is 1 grain, 1 milk, and 2 fruit items. In SFSP Breakfast OVS, the participant can decline 1 food item for a reimbursable meal. In the first example, the participant declined the muffin, and in the second, the milk was declined. Both of these meals are reimbursable in the SFSP Breakfast OVS. For SFSP Lunch OVS, the sponsor must offer 5 food items for the 4 components. As a reminder, in SFSP Meal Pattern, Fruit and vegetables are combined into one component, but there must be 2 separate servings of different items being served. Example menu offerings are turkey sandwich, fresh apple, baby carrots, and milk. Another example is a bean and cheese burrito, fiesta corn, mandarin oranges, and milk. For OVS lunch, participants can decline 2 components. Examples, OVS meals here would be the turkey sandwich and milk, or the fiesta corn, mandarin oranges, and milk would both make up reimbursable meals. Now that we have the meal pattern down, let's review the meal service requirements. Of the utmost importance is conforming to local, state, and federal sanitation requirements. These include ensuring adequate facilities to prepare and store food and alerting the local health department of the intention to provide food service with details. For meal service itself, only the meal types that are approved in C&P Web may be claimed for reimbursement. For instance, if only lunch is selected, then only lunch may be claimed. ODE C&P is unable to retroactively approve meal types. So if there are changes between when the renewal is approved and actual operations, update C&P Web as soon as possible to avoid any missed reimbursements. The meal site must operate in accordance with the site type that is approved, meaning open sites must truly be open to kids in the community, and closed enrolled is for participants enrolled in enrichment at the site. If the site is approved for non-congregate meals, there cannot be a requirement that participants stay on site. Meal service times. Meals may only be served during the approved meal times listed in C&P Web. ODE C&P reviewers can allow for a few minutes on either end of the meal service to ensure service to participants. However, if participants are showing up consistently 15 minutes early for or after meal service, revise the meal service time to accurately reflect what is occurring at the site. Additionally, meals that are delivered to a meal site must be delivered within an hour of the meal service time if the site does not have proper holding facilities. We have a common finding around meal service, and that is failure to document temperatures. There are few places that this finding can occur. For self-prep sponsors, meal prep sites must maintain documentation on equipment and food that is being prepared. For sponsors that work with food service management companies or other vendors, the vendor staff must maintain documentation on equipment and food that is being prepared. For meals that are served away from the prep site, meal site staff must document food temperatures upon delivery and maintain this documentation. This means that sites must have access to a thermometer. Meal temps can be documented on the delivery receipt for the site as well. On to more meal service requirements. Each site must have a site supervisor. Site supervisors must ensure that a point of service meal count is being taken. Additionally, site supervisors must remain on the site for the entire meal service. They also must ensure that meals are consumed on site at congregate meal sites. If there are congregate meals still on site when trained supervision is leaving, the meals still being consumed must be disallowed by the meal count staff. Disallowed meals must be indicated on the meal count form. Finally, meals served away from approved locations. This most commonly occurs when there is a field trip. Before the field trip, update C&P Web with the field trip date and let your specialists know so that they can approve it. The field trip meal service needs to meet the meal service requirements at the site, meaning someone trained must be on the field trip to take the point of service meal count, and it must be served within the approved meal time. Our final meal service requirement is the off-site consumption of foods. Congregate sites may be approved to allow participants to take one grain, fruit, or vegetable item off-site. Non-congregate sites can be approved for participants to take meals and/or snacks in rural areas and in areas that have approved waivers for heat and/or air quality. Since the ending of pandemic-era waivers and implementation of rural non-congregate meals, there has been an uptick in participants taking meals away from the site, but the site is not approved for non-congregate meals. This finding occurs when participants are taking meals off-site and the supervising staff is not disallowing them. This is most typical at outdoor sites when there is limited staff. If the site is approved as a congregate meal site, meals taken off-site during a review will be disallowed by ODE CMP. If you have sites in a rural area, be proactive and submit for approval to serve non-congregate meals. Having limited staff is an accepted reason to allow non-congregate meals. During operations, sites must meet the civil rights requirements. These include having the "And Justice for All" poster posted at all meal sites in an area visible to participants. If you need posters, please contact ODE CMP to order them. Each site also needs the current civil rights complaint log and forms. These can be on the meal count clipboard, in a folder, or in a binder. These can be downloaded from the ODE CMP Civil Rights page. Any posted SFSP materials such as menus or flyers need to have the current short form non-discrimination or NDS on them. When it comes to the World Wide Web, websites and social media need to have the current NDS if they refer to child nutrition programs. Websites also need to have a limited English proficiency statement on who or what families can contact for language assistance. The image on this slide is of the main ODE CMP public website. You can access civil rights information and documents by clicking on the Civil Rights button under the Child Nutrition Program Resources heading. Finally, we have come to site monitoring. All SFSP sites need some level of monitoring during operations. The first 2-week visit is required for new sites and sites that had issues in the previous fiscal year. How are you going to know if they had issues? You're going to look at last year's site monitoring reports and, if applicable, the review report from ODE's last review. Site monitoring reviews are required for all SFSP sites. This review must be within the first 4 weeks of operations. Sponsors may choose to also complete the first 2-week visit at the same visit if the visit occurs within the first 2 weeks of operations and both forms are completed. Racial and ethnic data collection may be completed with the site monitoring visit. All monitoring forms are available on the ODE CMP public SFSP website under the Monitoring subheading. This leads us to our last common finding during operations: failure to conduct or document site monitoring. There is no exception that gives sites that participate in other child nutrition programs a free pass on monitoring. Site monitoring must be conducted by someone who has taken the site monitoring training and is not the site supervisor for the site being reviewed. Dates that monitoring is planned for are entered in CMP Web. Keep it in front of your eyes by adding these dates to a commonly used calendar and, if applicable, share it with the site monitor. As a reminder, both the first 2-week visit and 4-week site review forms are on the ODE CMP SFSP public website, and these reviews may be completed on the same day if both forms are completed. Here are some operational tips. If you're unfamiliar with the NFL, this here is Carly Irsay. She's the new owner of the Indianapolis Colts and made a name for herself by being a hands-on owner. Rather than sitting in the owner's box with her feet up, she put on a headset, grabbed the play call sheet, and was communicating with coaches during games this past season. As the food program coordinator, you are the owner of your organization's summer meal program. Tip number 1 is that SFSP is not set it and forget it. SFSP is not a crock-pot recipe. There are a lot of moving pieces, from food orders to staff to participants. Keep a close eye on how they're all working together, which includes working closely with monitors. Have a plan to regularly review monitoring forms to ensure that sites are operating within regulations. Also, compare the meal counts to the ADA and CMP Web to see where you are with meal targets. Of course, remember to update CMP Web as needed. Finally, collect and utilize community feedback. Summer Meals is a program for the community. Sometimes feedback can help staff realize the impact they're having, while other feedback may lead to improvements. The last section is administrative reviews. Administrative reviews occur at least once every 3 years, but can be more frequent if the previous review had major findings. Reviews can be announced or unannounced. ODE-CMP will contact sponsors who are getting an announced review no more than 4 weeks from its planned scheduled date. Of course, reviews may need to be completed earlier if accommodations are needed for scheduling. Unannounced reviews are exactly what they sound like. ODE-CMP reviewers show up unannounced but ready to observe how the program is operating. During reviews, if there are areas not in compliance with regulations, there may be findings. Findings are accompanied by needing to have a required corrective action plan. Corrective action plans are meant to be used to create a plan or process to strengthen the program. Findings may also result in a fiscal assessment. If a fiscal assessment is $100 or more, it must be repaid. These are the areas that tend to have major findings during reviews. These are the meal pattern, point of service meal counts, meal count consolidations, and record keeping. Failure to meet meal pattern can be a costly finding. Sponsors are required to be able to demonstrate that the meals they are serving meet meal pattern requirements. Combination foods made in-house require a standardized recipe with crediting information. This is ideally a completed recipe analysis workbook from the USDA Food Buying Guide, but can also be recipes with crediting information from Food Hero, the Institute of Child Nutrition or ICN, or the USDA. Missing a recipe will not result in meal disallows, but will require a recipe with crediting information to be created, as well as a plan to ensure there are recipes moving forward. Commercially prepared combination items require a child nutrition label or manufacturer's product formulation statement. If there is no documentation to support commercially prepared combination items, those meals will be disallowed, and there will be a requirement to create a plan to ensure that this documentation is maintained on file in the future. Meeting meal pattern also means meeting the portion size required for the item to credit towards a reimbursable meal. Dated working menus or production records are needed as documentation to show what was actually served each day. Finally, maintain medical statements for any meal substitutions that impact the meal pattern. Only school food authorities can accept meal preference forms for substituting milk. All other organizations are required to accept valid medical statements for menu substitutions. The point of service meal count is the point of service where the participant has a reimbursable meal in hand. ODE has meal count templates available for congregate and non-congregate meals on the ODE-CMP Summer Meals page. Site staff must include on their meal count form if a clicker is being used. If your organization creates its own meal count form, please submit it to ODE for review. This is to help ensure that the form collects all the required information. Now, what is not a point of service meal count? It is not the number of prepared meals minus the number of meals left over, the number of meals families register for and pick up, the number of meals taken for a field trip, the number of kids on site eating once the meals are served. It's not the number of kids going to the garbage can with discards, and it's not the number of trays returned. Failing to have a point of service meal count can be a costly finding. The meal count form must be separate from a check-in or attendance form. The meal count must be an accurate reflection of the meals served. If serving non-congregate meals, take extra caution if serving meal boxes that contain meals for multiple meal types, multiple days, and/or multiple participants. Once you have meal counts, it is on to consolidating the meal count. During this process, you are ensuring that all meal count forms are accurately completed. Ensure that first meals, second meals, adult meals, and disallowed meals for each meal type are recorded separately. As a reminder, first and second meals need to be reported in C&P Web separately, and adult meals cannot be included in totals for claiming purposes. Some find it useful to use a spreadsheet to consolidate meal counts. Make sure that each site is consolidated and reported separately in C&P Web. Our last costly finding is inaccurate consolidated meal counts. In the meal claim process, include a step to consolidate meal counts by site. Ideally, have a second staff person check the consolidation for accuracy. After the meal claim is entered in C&P Web, include a check to ensure there are no entry errors before submitting the claim. Record keeping is a big piece of the summer food service program. Record keeping requirements include accurate information in C&P Web, written policies and procedures, documentation for site or participant eligibility based on site type, records that demonstrate reimbursable meals were served, records that support meal claims, documentation of staff training, documentation of all site monitoring, documentation of health department notification, and documentation to support nonprofit food service. Here are the most common findings around record keeping: missing supporting menu documentation, failure to maintain site eligibility documentation, failure to maintain staff training documentation, failure to maintain site monitoring documentation, no working menu or production record on site, and information in C&P Web is not up to date. There are tips to help with administrative reviews. In the event of an unannounced review, try to be as prepared as possible. This includes being organized right from the start by maintaining a folder or binder of all documents starting with renewals. Identify and train someone else on staff as backup for oversight. At the very least, they should know where to find documents the reviewer may need. In the event of an announced review, carefully review the confirmation email and required documents checklist. If you can, gather all required items in a central location. If you have any questions about operations or the review, reach out to your reviewer prior to the review. Getting questions out of the way early can help train staff and shore up operations before they are observed. Finally, we have reached what not to do in an administrative review. First, do not panic or stress about it. I know it's easier said than done, but reviewers are also hoping for an organized and clean review. Plus, it is a great time to show off what you're proud of in your program. Do not ignore the review confirmation letter or the required documents checklist. These items can be used to your benefit in preparing for the review. There is not a requirement to stay by the reviewer's side the entire time they are on site. In many cases, food program coordinators are wearing multiple hats and have other things going on as well. While you don't need to be glued to the reviewer, do not be missing in action either. If you need to step out, identify someone else to contact or give the reviewer your contact information. There will likely be a question and answer session, so be prepared for some one-on-one time. It is highly advisable that if you have an announced review that you do not wait to alert other team members of the review. The more that they are in the know, they can help in making sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Finally, if a document is missing, do not try to create or recreate it. It is best to let the reviewer know what the situation is and start creating the plan to ensure that it does not occur again. Administrative reviews should be nothing to fear. Take advantage of the time you have with reviewers to show them what good your program is doing and get answers to questions as they come up. If you do not have a review this year, stress test your systems this summer to see if there's anything that can be strengthened or improved upon. In this training, we covered pre-operational tasks, operational requirements, and administrative reviews. If you have any questions, please reach out to your assigned SFSP Child Nutrition Specialist. ODE supports equity and excellence for every learner. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. Thank you for attending this training.